Welcome back to Drinking by My Shelf. My name is Emma and this is Balancing the Books. In January, I had the slowest reading month that I have had for as long as I can remember. Since starting this booktube channel, I have not had a month where I read this few books. I don't know what happened. It's just blame January. But the good news is I also hauled fewer books. If you've been keeping up to speed with Balancing the Books, you'll see that the last 2 months I did atrociously. I suddenly just threw everything out the window, didn't even try, and my TBR grew all the way back up to 50. So I went into 2022 with 50 unread books on my shelf, which I know is not that bad by some booktube standards, but it's just not my goal. But let's see what I did in January. And because I did not read that much, but also didn't buy that much, this is actually going to be a surprisingly short video by Balancing the Books standards. The first thing I did, of course, was haul a book. This one I actually had in my house for ages, but I had never actually remembered to officially haul in Balancing the Books. So this is The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Natsukawa. I have had this one in my house since before Christmas, and I kept just forgetting to actually put it on my TBR shelf. So it is now officially on my TBR shelf. I recently tried the first chapter of it in the Try a Chapter tag, which I will link to below. You'll see quite a few of these also featured in that video. I want to read it. I think it's going to be cute. It's about a cat who helps a teenage boy go on these missions to save books, but it is a book for adults, so I think it's going to be sort of magical and sweet. Then my sister gave me a book, The Dad Avocado by Elaine Dundy. So this is one that she got in a subscription box, and she started reading it and was loving it. She would not stop talking to me about it. She said it was like Angus Thongs from Full Frontal Snogging, but set in the 50s and written in the 50s. And there was one particular scene that happens early on, which I haven't got to yet, but she just could not stop laughing at how funny it was. And then suddenly she lost interest, and she suddenly just came over and gave this book to me and was like, you know what, I've got the gist, I don't need to read any more of this book. So that's a very intriguing response. What made her suddenly lose interest so much? So I'm going to give it a go. Again, I read the first chapter, or read some of the first chapter. It was a pretty long chapter. So far I was finding it very funny. This main character is complete chaos, and I love a chaotic main character. So I'm interested to see, will I suddenly be like, this is too much, I've got the gist, I don't want any more, or will I stick it out? I hauled Hare House from Work by Sally Hinchcliffe. So this, again, I've read the first chapter. Honestly, I've just done this same video twice. Just go and watch the other one. This one is a modern witch story. So it's about a woman who had to leave the school where she worked under mysterious circumstances. And I had a look at the first chapter, and it was sort of this mass hysteria, all these fainting girls and screaming and people coming running to see what was happening. So that sounded very exciting. And she then moves to this remote estate in Scotland, and weird things are going to start happening in the community. So I think it's going to be like a witch hunt. And about 3 weeks into the year, I finally actually read a book. I read Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda and Ngozi Adichie. I'd had this one on my TBR shelf for maybe 2 years. So I borrowed this one. My friend Maddie read it and loved it and lent it to me and said I should read it. And then I just didn't, very rudely, for, I'm going to say, a year and a half. Maybe it wasn't quite 2 years. I finally read it, and it did take me about 3 weeks to read. And it was a real slog of a book. That's not to say it wasn't good. It was just very intense, so I had to read it little bits at a time because I kept wanting to get a break from it. I have read one other book by Chimamanda and Ngozi Adichie before, which was Americana, which I absolutely loved. It's one of my favourites of the year that I read it. And this book was very different because that one was a delight, and this one is not a delight. I think it's a book that I should try reading again at some point because there was loads in here to learn from. I think it was an incredible book. I think I just wasn't in the right space to read it because it was so intense and so upsetting, so I kept just avoiding reading it, and that's why I ended up not really reading anything in January. I also had been avoiding reading this one, I think, because of disagreeing with some of the views of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie that she had been publicly saying, but I do think she's a beautiful writer. I got given Goodbye to Berlin as a present when I left Berlin. So I went to Berlin in January just for a weekend, which was so much fun. Went to stay with some old friends who lived there who we hadn't seen at all since pre-COVID. We were at university together. So there were 4 of us hanging out in Berlin for a weekend at their flat, and it was really, really fun. And when I got back, I got given this one as a present because I had just said goodbye to Berlin. I'm interested to read this one because this is Cabaret, which I have seen but only once and a long time ago. And also just having been in Berlin, the history there is so fascinating, and I realise there's so many gaps in what I understand of the history of Berlin, and you can really see it in the city. It's almost like 4 different cities, So this book being set in the 30s is just like a key part of that puzzle. And then on, I think, the last day of the month, I had been reading 2 books at once, which is really rare for me, and I finally finished both of them. So I managed to go from, I almost only read 1 book in the whole of January, I managed to bring it up to 3. So I finished The Interview, this is my proof copy, the cover will look more like this, by C.M. Ewan. This is a thriller, like a fun, fast-paced action story about a woman who goes for an interview that starts going really creepily wrong. The questions start getting really disturbing, and she realises she is alone in this building with this man she doesn't know. So it's all told like over the space of a few hours that she's trapped there. I'd previously read C.M. Ewan wrote a book called A Window Breaks, which is about someone breaking into your house in the middle of the night, which is terrifying, and I really enjoyed that one. I think I enjoyed that one more than I enjoyed this one. There were some parts of this that were just like quite far-fetched, and so I started reading it. I read the first like 50% of it all in one go, and I was just really having fun with it. It was only when I put it down and then picked it up that I started to be like, this is quite over the top, because once you get thrown out of the story, it's quite hard to dive back in. But for a really fun page-turning story, it's great. C.M. Ewan definitely knows how to create a lot of tension. And then the last book that I finished was Kim Jiyoung, born in 1982 by Nam-Joo. So this was my Patreon book club pick. So I've been chatting a little bit to my Patreons throughout reading this, and it's such an interesting book, mostly I thought because of the context. So I had heard before this book was incredibly controversial. I can't remember the name of the celebrity, but a woman who is in a K-pop band was like cancelled because she said it was her favourite book, and that sort of showed her to be this like radical feminist, and so loads of people didn't want to listen to her music anymore. Like it was this really big deal, which was then so interesting reading this book because I didn't see what in here could possibly be so controversial. It just kind of shows the conversation about feminism being at different places in different countries, I guess. I enjoyed the book. I didn't love the book. So it starts off being about this woman, Kim Jiyoung, who starts like disassociating and taking on different personas, and that was really intriguing. And then suddenly that just stopped. That was just kind of the introduction, and then it just goes back into her past and tells her life story, and we follow this totally like realistic story. It's very upsetting, of just kind of an average woman. So from what I remember, someone told me Kim Jiyoung is like the equivalent of like Jane Smith. Like it's just supposed to show like she's just an average woman. And it shows all the ways in which sexism affects her life and restricts her choices. And it's infuriating to read, and it did make me really angry to read. But I was kind of waiting for the strange disassociating part to come back, and that just never really happened until right at the end it was sort of referenced again. So the majority of the book is written as if it's just non-fiction. It's just like a biography of her life, and then right at the end references. So that's why she started taking on different personas. So I was kind of disappointed like where that bit went away. I did like the ending. I didn't like the ending. It made me really angry. I did think it was like the perfect ending, but completely just made me want to scream. I think it's a book that I will be thinking about for a while, but it wasn't quite what I had hoped it would be when I started. So based on that is hauling 4 books and reading 3 books, but I'm going to start being good. I'm going to start taking balance in the book seriously again, so I need to get rid of a book. Luckily, as I said, I did the try a chapter video recently, which I will link below, and from that I found some books on my TBR that I am happy to get rid of. I don't want to just repeat myself, so I will let you watch that video if you want to see my reasoning. But these 3 books, 3 big chunky books that have been on my TBR for varying amounts of time, I actually think don't need to be on my TBR. I maybe don't need to read these ones. The one I was least certain about was Circus of Wonders. I think this will be a fantastic book. It's just I'm overwhelmed by books to read, and this is maybe the one that I need least of the ones still on my shelf. And these 2, The Family and A Little Hope, having read the first chapters, I just thought maybe not for me. Let me know if you think I'm wrong about any of those decisions. But the most exciting part of all of that, I've actually not just balanced the books, I have reduced my TBR now. I've gone down by 2. We're on 48 now. That's such a great start to the year. I can see this year going well for me. Have I read anything in February yet? To be confirmed. So let me know what brilliant things you've been reading this month in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to this channel to see if I start actually reading books again in 2022. That would be good for a booktuber to do, wouldn't it? See you next time.
I got my head out the sunroof. I'm blasting